100% orange juice is done. Only one more 100 title game to go. Wait. What's this? Ah, dang it. Someone released another game. Alright, fine. Let's do this. My name is Graeldon. I'm on an impossible journey to review every Steam game in alphabetical order, and today we're playing 100% Plasma Vitae. Let's begin. In the words of the famous Lonely Island group, I'm on a boat. Which is thematically appropriate because not only are we on a boat in today's game, but we're also looking to make some music while on a boat. Look, it's a whole thing, okay? Just trust me. With only a week on board the cruise ship, the Santa Felicidad, we'll need to put our time management skills to the test, balancing working various jobs, relaxing, putting on nightly performances, and meeting new friends to find that creative spark needed to complete a new album. Unfortunately, while the premise sounds like a pretty good time, the reality doesn't quite hold up to expectations, as is so often the case with games in this channel. Released on the 29th of March 2025, 100% Plasma Vitae snuck onto this list by releasing while I was still completing the 100% Orange Juice review. Developed by Plasma Team and published by H7 Games, this is actually their third game on Steam, with the first two being an Einstein riddle or zebra logic puzzle game, and one about sorting items in a lost and found station in the far reaches of the universe. So, jumping into a time management narrative game is certainly a bit of a departure, but good on them for branching out and trying something different. That said, visual novels are a pretty saturated genre, so what does this game have going for it other than avoiding the anime art style? Well, they instantly caught my attention in two ways. Firstly, by giving a choice between English and Portuguese as the language options, which does make sense considering it was developed by a Brazilian team, and by having no options or settings at all. Seriously, on the main menu we have Start Game, Achievements, Credits, and Exit. Right underneath those buttons is where I'd put the Settings one, if it had any settings. To be fair though, it launched smoothly, detected the correct resolution, and doesn't exactly need any graphical options. There isn't any voice acting either, so no sound section is needed, so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I understand this choice, and I respect it. I'd rather have no settings at all, rather than a repeat of the abomination that was Doki Doki Family. I still have nightmares about that. When starting a new game, there are 4 difficulty settings to choose from, all of which are based on blood types. From what I can tell, this is loosely based on pseudoscience that originated in Japan, which suggests that personality traits and therefore compatibility as friends or partners can be linked to different blood types. This is questionable at best, but as something linked to Japanese culture, I wasn't expecting it to appear in a Brazilian developed game, so that's neat. And it explains the title of the game, linking it to the Plasma Vitae, which is literally blood plasma. The problem, other than the theory, which is shaky at best anyway, is that they got the blood groupings very, very wrong. Now, keep in mind that I could be referencing the wrong theory, but even so, it's just inherently wrong when it comes to blood groups. If we assume that we are choosing the blood type of the player, and the ones we are determining affinity with are the characters we'll meet, then we can assume that makes us the recipient and them the donors. Following those rules, an AB recipient can receive all blood types, so the first one is correct. However, an O patient can only receive O blood, so should have been moved to the bottom as that makes it the hardest difficulty. Both types A and B can only receive blood from their own respective type or from O. That does only leave you with 3 levels of difficulty though, so perhaps the devs simply needed to get more creative and ignore the rules of the world for a bit. At the end of the day, it's a flawed system, and maybe they should have just assigned everyone a Myers-Briggs personality type and called it a day, because then you've got a more specific level of control over things. I'm apparently an ISFJ, by the way, also called the Defender type, so make of that what you will. I'll leave a link to a free test in the description if you're interested in finding out yours, but keep in mind that that's all based on pseudoscience as well. Seriously, if you think there are only 16 personality types in the entire world, then your entire world must be limited to 15 people other than yourself. Sorry, did I mention I sometimes go on tangents? No? Well, consider yourself informed now. Anyway, we pick a blood type and begin our adventure as a nameless musician, henceforth called Larry, as told through an expository text dump as we find ourselves on board a week-long cruise on the Santa Felicidad. Our task is to find inspiration for a new album we're composing called 100% Plasma Vitae, and now we can roll the credits! In a nutshell, we're looking for 4 attributes: ambition, vivacity, tranquility, and intellect, and this means we're going to have to perform the task that most of us gamers fear, nay, dread. Talking to strangers. Right after we get ourselves acquainted with the ship by speaking to the captain, of course. The captain is a dapper chap who drops the whole nautical language facade pretty quickly while he explains some of the basics, works a poop joke in, and reminds Larry that he needs to perform each night in order to be paid. By the way, the captain's name is Vasco, which is a lovely reference to the famous Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama, who made history by connecting Europe to India by establishing a trade route that passed around South Africa, amongst other things. Tutorial finished, we're now presented with the main navigation menu and basically left to our own devices. Each circle on the map represents an area with activities and people to meet, and the UI will display both the current day and time as well as your current stats, which are divided into the 4 attributes mentioned earlier. The 4 main areas that Larry will be spending time in are the casino, spa, library, and pool, as these are the areas where he'll be able to bump into new people as well as relax by spending some money or work if he has the attributes for it. Early in the morning there aren't many people around, and with only a single point in intellect, the only place Larry can work at is the casino, for which he's rewarded with some cash and some dice. More on those shortly. Once enough time has passed, he's able to meet the actual cast of characters, so let's introduce them. First up at the spa is Alice, who represents tranquility. In the library, you'll meet Annabella, who represents intellect. At the pool, you'll bump into Beth, who represents vivacity. And lastly, at the casino, you'll meet Ohana, who represents ambition. Each of these characters has a unique story to tell, and through these stories, you'll gain inspiration and add instruments to the track representing that attribute, but only if you're able to get yourself into the same mindset as the person you're talking to. For example, Alice tells a story about how she found herself playing a game of poker as part of an investigation into time-traveling cultists. Yeah. At the end of each paragraph, you're invited to guess what happens next, and this is represented through dice rolls. The first is a purely random roll, and then Larry's permanent and temporary stat points are added to this. If the total beats the number at the bottom, Larry wins and makes progress on the instrumentation of the music track. This is also where the predetermined dice rolls you gain from working come in. These are used in place of the random roll and can guarantee you success. In terms of stat points, Larry can earn temporary boosts by relaxing in any of the 4 areas for a fee, up to a maximum of 2 points, which are lost after the conversation ends. If you fail, like I did the first time, your progress isn't lost, but you need to complete the conversation again, which uses up valuable time on board the ship. I say valuable because each of the 4 characters will depart the ship on a different day, meaning you can lose pretty early on if you don't find the right character early enough, and the departure date and time are only revealed after completing the first conversation. So far, it sounds good. You need to listen to the stories of each character and hear everything before they leave the ship, so you'll need to figure out their schedules and make sure to meet them with the right stat boost and predetermined dice rolls in order to have the best odds of success. And you'd be mostly right. The thing is, the characters don't really have a schedule. They only go to one place for the same amount of time at the same time every day. For example, Alice is always at the spa from 9 AM to 5 PM, never anywhere else. And I think this is a huge missed opportunity, as it takes all the fun out of trying to figure out someone's schedule to make sure you can meet them when you need to. I guess this might be a limitation of trying to fit everything into 7 days of playtime, but it makes everything feel incredibly basic. Perhaps though, the focus isn't meant to be on the time management aspect, but on the narrative instead. It is a visual novel after all. So, let's see what the other stories are about. Annabella tells us a story about time travel where she is invited to a mysterious mansion and asked to translate a book that a version of herself from another dimension wrote. Beth shares a tale of how during a swimming competition she found herself competing against an actual mermaid, and Ohana reveals that her success is due to her successfully turning her hotel into a private venue for the rich to reenact a Greek-inspired orgy. Yeah, you heard that last one right. It's all handled rather tastefully, so don't worry if you're faint of heart. Doki Doki Family was far more raunchy than this, but it's probably abundantly clear that all of the stories are equally fantastical. They've got some interesting ideas, but they are ultimately short stories that need to skim over a lot of details, and while each of them are decently entertaining and unpredictable, they also aren't particularly memorable, with the majority blatantly calling out that it's up to Larry whether or not he believes that the story is actually true. I found that the storytelling also suffered from major pacing issues due to the need for Larry to constantly interject with his own thoughts. I get it from a gameplay perspective, it's reinforcing the idea of getting into the mindset of the storyteller, but if someone tried to guess what I was about to say when I was sharing a story in real life, I would find it incredibly frustrating. Maybe it's just me, but I would have preferred to view the story as a flashback from the perspective of the character, with an opportunity for questions afterwards. This would allow me to focus on and immerse myself in the story being told. As I mentioned earlier, you do still need to manage your time effectively, but it's a fairly simple matter. Once you've spoken to everyone and passed the first section, you'll know what time they are present, and after passing the second, you'll know what time they are departing, allowing you to prioritize certain characters and activities first. I managed to complete the second instrument for each track on the second day, where I discovered that one character, Ohana, would be leaving at the end of the third day, making it clear who to prioritize. As long as you get the temporary buffs and some decent predetermined dice, you probably won't have too much trouble from this point onwards. So let's talk about some of the other mechanics. For example, if you complete the activities that provide temporary buffs enough times, you can earn permanent stat boosts. This sounds great on paper, but is actually terribly implemented. For starters, the amount of times that you need to complete each activity is different for each stat, and additionally, the number of completions required is greater than the number of times you actually use that stat in conversation, making the buff useless as you'll no longer be using it. That said, I appreciate that the devs used this as an opportunity to work in some references to their previous games, such as boosting intellect by collecting zebra logic cards, or being given random prizes after swimming that are intergalactic lost and found items. The game is actually eerily quiet at the start, especially when in conversation with characters, but this is because the instruments are layered in as you complete the track in question, which is a nice touch. However, it makes the game very boring from an auditory perspective early on. I'm also confused by how on earth they calculate progress in this game. When completing an instrument for a track, the percentage completion is shown on screen, and moves from 0% to 25%, then 50%, and then jumps to 100%. This is possibly because you only need to get 3 out of 4 conversation checks correct, but I don't understand why it isn't simply 0%, 33%, 66%, and then 100% to make the progress even and better communicate to the player how close they are to completion. The overall track completion works in the same way as each instrument is added, going from 0% to 40%, then 60%, 80%, and 100%, simply skipping over 20% for no apparent reason. Again, it could have easily been 0%, 25%, 50%, 75%, 100%. Maybe they wanted to keep the player on their toes. Maybe there were originally more parts planned that got removed during development of the game. We'll probably never know. Either way, it's confusing, and it would make me happy to see this fixed in a patch. As mentioned at the start of the game, Larry can also earn extra cash by performing in the lounge each night. There is a 2-hour window during which you can perform, and in a completely unrealistic twist, you'll earn the same amount of money regardless of whether you perform for all 2 hours or just the remaining 30 minutes. As long as you show up during the performance window, you get paid. In addition to using your money to relax at the various attractions, you can also spend money in the gift shop. In fact, this is mandatory, as for the final stage of each story, you'll need to present the character with a gift. This isn't particularly difficult, as there are only 4 gifts available to purchase, one for each character. Personally, I think this would be much more interesting if there were a larger selection and you could ask probing questions during conversation to figure out which gift is appropriate for each person. Speaking of which, pro tip for any wannabe gift givers out there: do not attempt to buy a bathing suit as a gift for a random person. If you get the wrong size, it'll be insulting. If you get the right size, you're probably a stalker. Either way, not worth the risk. As time passes, Larry will complete the songs for his album one by one, and the passengers will leave the cruise. Eventually, there was nothing to do except work and relax, so I took the chance to earn 1,000 gold to see if anything would happen. And nothing did. So I decided to spend the gold getting every collectible and permanent stat boost possible, and still nothing happened. After completing the game, I remembered that there are achievements, so I took a look, and sure enough, the in-game menu showed that I had completed them. However, they failed to trigger correctly on Steam. It's nice to know that my efforts weren't completely wasted, but still, I got to the end of the cruise, I completed the album, I had forged connections with random strangers, and yet I felt alone, empty, incomplete. Maybe it's a sign that I need to be spending less time in games and more time making real, valuable connections with people in real life. Maybe. Or maybe it's because I just want to play a game that's actually good with a satisfying ending, and this wasn't it. 100% Plasma Vitae has all the makings of a good narrative-based time management/visual novel game, in the same way that the cruise it is depicting in the game has all the makings of a good cruise liner. And what I mean by that is that from the outside it looks fine, but on the inside it's missing core components, and what is there isn't very polished. Where is the buffet, the water slides, or the cinema? Where is the actual depth to the game? Where are all the male characters? To be fair, if they had made, let's say, the ambition and intellect characters male and the vivacity and tranquility characters female, we probably would have taken issue with that. My point is that everything is very surface level, including the enjoyment you're going to get from the game. There are a few simple things and a few not so simple things that I would personally change to elevate this from mediocre to good. Firstly, there needs to be more complexity in the routines of the passengers. Have them visit different locations at different times. Yes, they are meant to be tied to the attributes they represent, but you could solve that by simply having them spend the majority of their time in the appropriate location and shorter amounts of time elsewhere. Additionally, you could make it so that you can interact and progress their story in any location, but you receive a stat boost by being in the correct location. That way, proper planning is rewarded, but you're not locked out of progression if you mistime things. Additionally, all activities should be balanced to have the same requirements to earn the permanent stat boost, and all passengers should disembark the ship at the same time. That way, if you happen to miss finding one passenger early on, you're not forced to restart the entire playthrough because they left early. Or if the duration of the cruise is extended to allow for extra roaming and exploration, have passengers join the cruise at different stages of the journey, but stay on board for the same number of days. Additionally, I suggest adding in other characters to meet that are not part of the story progression to help the setting feel more alive, and these characters could provide hints about the main characters and their whereabouts on the ship. I would also rework the idea behind the music so that the tracks that Larry is composing only play during conversation with the character it relates to, rather than when you are in the relevant location. Having location-specific music would add more variety and character to the areas, and also serve to add more personality to each character. For example, it would mean I don't associate the ambition track with the casino, but rather with Ohana specifically, and that feels more impactful to me. I think the core idea of the game is interesting, if perhaps not unique. And when something isn't unique, it needs to be executed really well in order to be worthy of someone's time. I do think that the individual character stories are the strongest part of the game, but they are let down by the way in which they're told. And it's because I feel that way that I'm choosing not to spoil the individual stories, so that if you're a fan of visual novels like this, you'll still have something to discover if you decide to pick it up. However, even though it's only $7.50 dues, I'm not sure I can recommend it in its current state. Assuming you beat it on your first playthrough like I did, you're looking at only 1 to 2 hours of playtime, which is about right for the price point. The issue is that the writing just isn't that good, especially for the main character. Too many jokes land flat, too many lines that would never work in real life. It starts to feel like someone's fictional attempt at flirting with strangers, making me wonder if the main character is actually a self-insert of one of the devs. Add on top of that the fact that the final music compositions are just mediocre, and you can't help but wonder what it was all for in the end. Don't get me wrong, the music isn't bad, but it isn't great either. And when the focus of the narrative is on the music, the final product needs to be worthwhile. And while I know some of you might judge me a bit for this, I think that the fact they don't have the soundtrack for sale as a separate purchase speaks to the confidence they have in their own music. And again, I think this is a huge shame, because in the right hands, this could have been something quite lovely. A short, poignant story about discovering musical inspiration in unlikely places, and the almost unbelievable stories and experiences that strangers around us have to share, if we would but simply ask them. And I think that it's with that in mind that I give 100% Plasma Vitae my final rating of Sonder out of 10. It's the realization that each random passerby has a life as vivid and complex as your own, and in this case, more interesting than your own. Thanks for watching. Welcome to the end of the video. Today's Larry was sponsored by Chev_. If you'd like to sponsor a Larry, check out the membership options below. As always, thank you to all the members on screen for supporting the channel, and a special thank you to our Knight of the Holy Grail, Freaky Feline. That's all for now, so if you made it this far, here's a sneak peek of the next game. And until next time, take care.